The grand hall stretched so far that Tae-sung could barely see where it ended. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves, though he knew they were deep inside a massive space station. Beings from 100 different worlds filled the hall, and Tae-sung felt very small among them. He adjusted his formal jacket for the 10th time. The fabric felt strange against his skin, made from some alien material that the diplomats had assured him was appropriate for the occasion. Tae-sung was not a diplomat. He was a marine biologist who studied jellyfish and coral reefs. He had no idea why Earth's delegation had brought him to the Valorian Empire's selection ceremony. "Stop fidgeting," whispered Ambassador Park from beside him. The older woman smiled, but her eyes held a warning. "Just stand straight and try to look presentable." Tae-sung nodded and forced his hands to his sides. Around them, the other species looked far more impressive. To his left stood 3 beings from a warrior race, each one nearly 3 meters tall with armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. To his right, floating creatures made of what appeared to be living light drifted in elegant patterns. Humans, by comparison, looked terribly ordinary. A deep sound rang through the hall, like a bell made from an entire mountain. The crowd fell silent. The Valorian royal family entered from the far end of the hall. Even at this distance, Tae-sung could see they were beautiful in an otherworldly way. Their skin held a faint silver shimmer, and they moved with perfect grace. 4 figures in flowing robes walked in formation. But Tae-sung's eyes were drawn to the third one. Princess Haerin moved differently from her siblings. While they smiled and waved to the crowd, she walked with her head high, her expression neutral. She looked like someone who was here because duty demanded it, not because she wanted to be. "The selection will now begin," announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The honored royal children will choose their attendants for the coming cycle." Tae-sung watched as the eldest prince stepped forward. The process was simple enough. A representative from each species would step onto a raised platform, and the royal would either accept them or gesture for the next candidate. The prince chose quickly, selecting a massive warrior from the Krathos people. The crowd applauded as the warrior bowed deeply. The second princess took longer. She examined scholars and artists, asking each one questions that Tae-sung could not hear from his position. Finally, she selected a being whose head was covered in what looked like waving tentacles. More applause. Then it was Princess Haerin's turn. She walked to the center of the platform, and the first candidate approached. A warrior, even larger than the one chosen by the prince. The princess looked at him for perhaps 3 seconds, then shook her head. The warrior seemed shocked, but retreated. Candidate after candidate approached. Scientists, warriors, artists, diplomats. Princess Haerin rejected them all with barely a glance. The crowd began to murmur. This was unusual. The selection was supposed to be an honor, a careful choice. The princess seemed bored by the entire process. Tae-sung felt sorry for her. He understood being trapped in situations where you did not want to be. How many academic conferences had he attended, presenting his research on ocean ecosystems to people who barely pretended to listen? The princess's eyes swept across the hall, and for just a moment they passed over the human delegation. Tae-sung expected them to keep moving. Humans were new here, barely known. They had nothing to offer compared to these ancient and powerful species. But the princess's gaze stopped, came back, fixed directly on him. Tae-sung's heart began to pound. Surely she was looking at Ambassador Park, or perhaps at the cultural attaché standing behind them. Not at him. That made no sense. Princess Haerin raised her hand and pointed, her finger aimed directly at Tae-sung's chest. "I want this one," she said. Her voice carried clearly across the sudden silence. The hall exploded in whispers. Tae-sung stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Ambassador Park grabbed his arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "Your Highness," called out a Valorian official, stepping forward with evident confusion on his face. "Perhaps there has been a mistake. The humans are merely observers. They are not presenting candidates for selection." "I am aware," Princess Haerin said calmly. "I have made my choice. The human. That one." She pointed at Tae-sung again, as if there could be any doubt. But, Your Highness, the official tried again. The humans are a newly contacted species. They have no standing in the Empire. They are weak, short-lived, and possess no remarkable abilities. Then my choice should trouble you less, the princess replied. Her voice held an edge now, a warning. If they are so unremarkable, what harm can it do? I have chosen. The selection is binding. Tae-sung found his voice finally. Wait, I don't understand. I'm not supposed to be chosen. I'm a scientist, not a diplomat or an attendant. I study marine life. I don't know anything about being in a royal court. The princess looked at him directly for the first time. Her eyes were a pale gold color, unlike anything Tae-sung had ever seen. They studied him with an intensity that made him want to look away, but he forced himself to hold her gaze. You are Tae-sung, she said. You published 17 research papers on the recovery of Earth's ocean ecosystems after environmental collapse. You found ways to restore balance to systems that your own people had nearly destroyed. You see problems differently than others do. Tae-sung felt his mouth fall open. She had read his research papers. Why would an alien princess read his research papers? Your Highness, this is highly irregular, another Valorian official said, rushing forward. Perhaps if we delayed the selection for this cycle, allowed time to properly vet candidates from Earth. The selection is complete, Princess Hayrin cut him off. Tradition is clear. My choice is made and witnessed. The human will come to the palace. Unless, she turned back to Tae-sung, you wish to refuse? You may do so, though it will mean Earth's delegation must leave the ceremony in disgrace, and humanity's petition for membership in the Galactic Council will be denied. Ambassador Park's fingers tightened even more on Tae-sung's arm. He did not need to look at her to know what that meant. If he refused, he would ruin everything Earth had worked toward for the past 5 years. He would be the man who destroyed humanity's chance at the stars because he was too afraid to serve an alien princess. I accept, Tae-sung heard himself say. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant and unreal. Princess Hayrin nodded once. Good, we will speak soon. Then she turned and walked away, her robes trailing behind her like water. The ceremony continued, but Tae-sung barely noticed. He stood in the hall surrounded by aliens, having just agreed to something he did not understand. Chosen by a princess for reasons that made no sense. Ambassador Park leaned close. What just happened? She whispered. Tae-sung shook his head slowly. I have absolutely no idea. But as he watched Princess Hayrin rejoin her family, he saw something that no one else seemed to notice. Just for a moment, the corner of her mouth lifted in the smallest smile. She looked satisfied, like someone who had just completed the first move in a very long game. Tae-sung swallowed hard. Whatever game the princess was playing, he was now a piece on the board. He just hoped he would survive long enough to understand the rules. The palace was even more overwhelming than the ceremony hall. Tae-sung followed a stern-looking Valorian woman named Yoon Seo through corridors that seemed to shift and change color as they walked. She had introduced herself as the chief attendant to Princess Hayrin, and her expression made it clear what she thought about the princess's choice. These will be your quarters, Yoon Seo said, stopping before a door that opened without being touched. The atmospheric controls have been adjusted for human requirements. The food synthesizer has been programmed with Earth nutrients, though I cannot promise the taste will be familiar. Tae-sung stepped inside. The room was large, far larger than his apartment back on Earth. A window showed the gardens below, where alien plants grew in colors that hurt to look at directly. The princess will summon you when she requires your presence, Yoon Seo continued. Until then, you are free to explore the public areas of the palace. Do not enter any door marked with a red symbol. Do not approach the royal family without permission. Do not touch anything that glows. That last one seems important, Tae-sung said. What happens if I touch something that glows? It depends on what you touch, Yoon Seo replied without a hint of humor. Some things explode. Some things simply kill you. Please avoid both. She left before Tae-sung could ask any more questions. He sat down on what he hoped was a chair and tried to make sense of his new reality. He was in an alien palace, chosen by a princess who had read his research papers and surrounded by technology he could not begin to understand. His communicator chimed. A message from Ambassador Park appeared, asking if he was all right. Tae-sung sent back a quick reply saying he was fine, which was not exactly true but seemed like the diplomatic thing to say. 3 days passed before Princess Heron summoned him. 3 days of eating strange food, sleeping in a bed that floated slightly off the floor, and trying not to accidentally touch anything that glowed. The palace staff avoided him, though he often felt eyes watching from doorways and corners. When the summons finally came, Yoon Seo led him to a garden on one of the upper levels. Princess Heron sat beside a fountain that flowed upward instead of down. She wore simpler clothes than at the ceremony, though they still looked far more elegant than anything Tae-sung owned. "Sit," she said, gesturing to a bench across from her. Tae-sung sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The princess seemed content to watch the fountain. Tae-sung tried to think of something appropriate to say and failed completely. "Tell me about Earth's oceans," the princess said finally. Of all the things Tae-sung had expected her to ask, that was not one of them. But at least it was something he could answer. "They cover about 70% of our planet's surface," he began. "For a long time, we took them for granted. We overfished, polluted, and destroyed entire ecosystems. By the early 21st century, we had caused enormous damage." "But you fixed it," Princess Heron said. "How?" "We changed our approach," Tae-sung said, warming to the subject. "We stopped trying to control the oceans and started trying to understand them. We learned to work with natural processes instead of against them. It took decades, and we made many mistakes, but slowly things began to recover." The princess nodded slowly. "You did not have advanced technology. You did not have great power, yet you solved a problem that threatened your entire world." "We were stubborn," Tae-sung said with a small smile. "Humans are very good at being stubborn." "Yes," the princess said, and for the first time she smiled too. "I have noticed this about your species." She asked him more questions about his research, about Earth, about human history. Tae-sung answered as best he could, though he still had no idea why she cared. After an hour, she dismissed him with a simple nod. The pattern repeated over the following weeks. The princess would summon him every few days, ask questions about Earth and humanity, then send him away. She never explained why. Tae-sung began to feel like a particularly interesting laboratory specimen. Meanwhile, court life continued around him. Tae-sung learned to navigate the palace, to identify which aliens were friendly and which ones sneered at the weak human. He spent his free time in the palace library, reading about galactic history and trying to understand this strange new world. It was in the library that he first met Lord Cavil. The Valorian noble was tall, even by his species standards, with silver hair that fell to his shoulders. He looked at Tae-sung the way someone might look at an insect. "So you are the princess's pet human," Cavil said, his voice smooth and cold. "How amusing." "I'm not anyone's pet," Tae-sung replied, keeping his voice level. "No?" Cavil smiled. "Then what are you? You have no skills we value, no strength, no advanced knowledge, no diplomatic standing. You are here because the princess finds you momentarily interesting. When that interest fades, you will be sent home in disgrace." Tae-sung said nothing. There was nothing to say. Cavil might be cruel, but he was not entirely wrong. The noble leaned closer. "There is a banquet in 3 days. The princess has requested your attendance. It will be a formal affair with traditional challenges. I do hope you are prepared." Cavil walked away, leaving Tae-sung with a cold feeling in his stomach. He asked Yoon Seo about the banquet later. The chief attendant's expression grew even more stern than usual. "Valorian banquets include strength trials," she explained. "Games and challenges to display ability. Normally, attendants are not required to participate. However, if challenged directly, you cannot refuse without bringing shame to your patron." "The princess," Tae-sung said. "Yes. Lord Cavil seeks to marry her. He views you as an obstacle to be removed, or perhaps just an amusement. Either way, he will challenge you. You will fail. The princess will look foolish for choosing you." Yoon Seo paused. "I am sorry. I do not mean to be cruel, but you should know the truth." The banquet hall was even larger than the ceremony hall. Tae-sung wore formal clothes that Yoon Seo had provided, though he felt ridiculous in them. He sat at a table far from the princess, surrounded by minor nobles who ignored him completely. The food was strange and mostly inedible to human tastes, but Tae-sung pretended to eat. Around him, various beings demonstrated their abilities. Warriors lifted massive weights. Scholars solved complex mathematical puzzles in seconds. Artists created beautiful illusions from thin air. Then Lord Cavil stood. "I propose a traditional challenge," he announced. "The Maze of Strength." A section of the floor opened, revealing a complex mechanical puzzle. Tae-sung recognized it vaguely from his research in the library. The goal was to move a sphere from one end to the other by manipulating various levers and platforms. It required both strength and strategy. "I challenge the human," Cavil said, smiling. "Let us see what the princess's choice can accomplish." Every eye in the hall turned to Tae-sung. He stood slowly, his heart pounding. He walked to the maze and looked down at it. The puzzle was designed for beings much stronger than him. Several of the levers would require force he simply did not have. But as he studied it, Tae-sung noticed something. The maze was not just about strength. It was a mechanical system, and like any system, it had inefficiencies and shortcuts. The expected solution required moving platforms one at a time through brute force. But what if there was another way? He started working, ignoring Cavil's smug expression. Instead of trying to muscle the heavy levers, Tae-sung manipulated the smaller switches first. He adjusted the angles of the platforms, creating a chain reaction. When he finally pulled the main lever, the system's own momentum did most of the work. The sphere rolled smoothly from one end to the other in half the time of the previous record. The hall fell silent. Tae-sung stepped back from the maze, breathing hard. He had not used strength. He had used physics, leverage, and careful observation. He had solved the puzzle in a way no one expected. Lord Cavil's face had gone rigid with shock and anger. Around the hall, nobles whispered to each other. Some looked impressed, others looked confused. Tae-sung glanced toward the head table. Princess Haerin sat very still, but her eyes were bright. She was not surprised, he realized. She had expected something like this. Maybe even hoped for it. As Tae-sung returned to his seat, one of the minor nobles leaned over. "How did you do that?" the alien asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "I'm human," Tae-sung said simply. "We're good at finding the easy way to do hard things." Later that night, a message arrived in his quarters. It was from the princess, just 3 words. "Well done, Tae-sung." He fell asleep, wondering what exactly he had gotten himself into, and whether the princess's game was more dangerous than he had realized. The Botanical Research Station floated in orbit around a small moon, its transparent walls showing an endless view of stars. Princess Haerin had invited Tae-sung to accompany her on what was supposed to be a simple diplomatic visit. The station specialized in cultivating plants from different worlds, and the princess wanted to see their aquatic garden section. Tae-sung was happy to come along. After weeks in the palace, surrounded by politics and careful words, it felt good to look at something he understood. Plants and water systems. Simple science. Ji-woo, the princess's personal guard, walked 3 steps behind them. He was a quiet Valorian who rarely spoke, but Tae-sung had learned to respect him. Ji-woo treated Tae-sung like an actual person rather than a curiosity, which made him one of the few. "These water lilies are from my home province," Princess Haerin said, stopping beside a large pool. The flowers floating on the surface glowed with a soft blue light. "I have not seen them in years." Tae-sung leaned closer to examine them. "The bioluminescence is fascinating. On Earth, we have creatures that produce light, but very few plants." He pulled out a small device to take readings of the water chemistry, old habits from his researcher days. That was when he noticed something wrong. The water's pH levels were off. Not by much, but enough to kill these particular plants within a few days. He frowned and checked the station's environmental readouts on a nearby panel. According to the official readings, everything was perfect. "Something is wrong," Tae-sung said quietly. Princess Hyrin looked at him. Explain. The water chemistry does not match the station's sensors. Someone has either tampered with the monitoring systems or with the water itself. He showed her his device's readings. These plants should be dying, but they are not, which means these might not be the same plants that were here originally. Someone switched them recently. Jiwoo stepped forward immediately. Your Highness, we should leave, now. But before anyone could move, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing everything in red. An alarm began to sound, high and piercing. Lockdown initiated, announced a mechanical voice. Toxic contamination detected. All personnel remain in current locations. Jiwoo pulled out his weapon, a sleek device that hummed with power. He moved to stand between the princess and the door. Stay behind me. Through the transparent walls, Tae-sung could see other parts of the station. He spotted movement in the corridors. Figures in dark suits carrying weapons. Not station security. Something else. They are coming, Jiwoo said. His voice was calm, but Tae-sung could hear the tension beneath it. The door opened. 3 figures entered, their faces covered by helmets. They raised weapons toward the princess. Jiwoo fired first, and one of the attackers fell. But then a strange mist began to fill the room, and Jiwoo stumbled. Biotoxin, the guard gasped. Designed for Valorians. He fell to his knees, trying to raise his weapon but failing. Princess Hayrin swayed, her silver skin turning pale. She fell against the pool's edge, struggling to breathe. Tae-sung stood frozen for a heartbeat. The attackers ignored him completely. They were focused on the princess, assuming the human was no threat. And they were right. Tae-sung had no weapons, no training, no strength to fight them. But he was not affected by their poison. His mind raced. The research station was full of chemicals, biological samples, environmental controls. He knew systems like this. He had spent years studying closed ecosystems and how to manipulate them. Tae-sung grabbed his sample kit and ran. Not away from the danger, but deeper into the research section. The attackers shouted behind him, but he did not look back. He needed to reach the Environmental Control Center. The corridors were a maze, but the station's layout was similar to research facilities on Earth. Tae-sung followed the pipes and conduits, trusting his instincts. Behind him, he could hear footsteps. They were following. Good. Let them follow him instead of finishing off the princess. He reached the control center and locked the door behind him. It would not hold for long, but he did not need long. The panel before him showed the entire station's systems. Water circulation, air processing, temperature controls, everything. Tae-sung started typing commands. He rerouted the water system, increasing pressure in certain sections and decreasing it in others. He adjusted the air mixture in specific corridors, making it too rich in oxygen. He overrode the temperature controls in the storage areas where biological samples were kept. The door began to buckle. The attackers were breaking through. Tae-sung made one final adjustment and then dove under the console. The door exploded inward. 2 attackers entered, their weapons searching for him. That was when the station's systems went haywire in exactly the way Tae-sung had planned. In the corridor outside, a water pipe burst from overpressure. The high-oxygen air ignited from a spark in the damaged door mechanism. Not enough to cause a real fire, but enough to trigger the station's automatic fire suppression systems. Foam flooded the corridor. The attackers stumbled in the sudden chaos. One slipped on the wet floor and fell hard. Tae-sung grabbed a heavy sample case and swung it at the second attacker's head. His small human muscles were not enough to knock the alien out, but the combination of surprise and slippery footing sent the attacker crashing into the wall. Tae-sung ran again, back toward the princess. He had to hope his distraction had worked, that the other attackers had been drawn away or caught in the chaos he had created. The botanical section was a mess. Water from the pools had flooded across the floor from the pressure changes. Foam from the fire systems covered everything. Princess Hayrin lay where she had fallen, barely conscious. Jiwoo had managed to drag himself to her side, his weapon still gripped in his hand, though he could barely lift it. One attacker remained, standing over them both. He raised his weapon toward the princess's head. Tae-sung did not think. He just acted. He grabbed a container of plant fertilizer from a nearby shelf and threw it at the attacker. The container broke open, spraying chemical powder everywhere. The attacker turned toward him, annoyed rather than hurt. But the fertilizer was designed for alien plants with different biochemistry. When it mixed with the water and foam on the floor, it created a reaction. Not an explosion, but a thick, choking smoke that filled the room. The attacker stumbled, his helmet's filters clogging. Tae-sung grabbed one of the heavy light fixtures that had fallen during the chaos and swung it like a club. This time he aimed for the attacker's knee. The joint buckled and the alien fell. Ji-woo, somehow still conscious, fired his weapon. The shot went wide because of his weakened state, but it was enough. The attacker did not get up again. Tae-sung dropped beside Princess Haerin. "Stay with me," he said. "Help is coming. It has to be coming." And it was. Station security finally arrived, along with the princess's backup guards. They found Tae-sung sitting in the flooded, smoke-filled botanical section, covered in foam and fertilizer, holding the princess's hand while she struggled to breathe. The medical team rushed in. They gave the princess an antidote and stabilized Ji-woo. Both would survive, though they needed immediate treatment. As they carried the princess to the medical ship, her eyes found Tae-sung. She tried to speak but could not manage words. Instead, she squeezed his hand once. A thank you. Tae-sung sat down heavily on the wet floor, his whole body shaking as the adrenaline faded. He had fought trained assassins using nothing but a research station's environmental systems and improvised chemistry. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever done. But he had won. Not through strength or weapons, but by understanding systems and using what was available. Just like he had done his entire career, solving problems with creativity instead of power. Ji-woo, being loaded onto a medical stretcher, caught his eye. The guard managed a weak smile. "Not bad," he said, "for a human." Tae-sung laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Not bad for anyone," he replied. Later, when security reviewed the station's recordings, they found themselves watching something unprecedented. A human, the weakest species in the known galaxy by physical standards, had outsmarted and defeated multiple trained assassins. Not through combat, but through cleverness, quick thinking, and a deep understanding of how systems worked. The recording spread through the palace and beyond. People began to look at Tae-sung differently. The princess's strange choice suddenly seemed less strange. The weak human had saved a Valorian princess's life using nothing but his mind. Tae-sung did not feel like a hero. He felt exhausted and scared and very far from home. But when Princess Haerin was released from medical care 3 days later, she summoned him immediately. "You saved my life," she said simply. "I did what anyone would do," Tae-sung replied. "No," the princess said firmly. "You did what a human would do. You saw a problem that seemed impossible and refused to accept it. That is why I chose you, Tae-sung. That is what humanity offers the galaxy." For the first time since arriving on the station, Tae-sung understood. The princess had not chosen him randomly. She had chosen him because she needed someone who thought differently, who saw solutions where others saw only obstacles. He just wished he had understood that before people tried to kill them both. The palace gardens at night were beautiful in a way that made Tae-sung's chest ache. Plants from 100 worlds grew together under artificial stars, their scents mixing into something entirely new. Princess Haerin walked beside him, her hands clasped behind her back. 5 days had passed since the assassination attempt. The attackers had been identified as extremists opposed to Earth's integration into galactic society. They believed humans were too primitive, too dangerous to be allowed among the stars. The irony was not lost on Tae-sung. They had tried to prove humans were dangerous by trying to murder a princess. "I owe you the truth," Princess Haerin said suddenly. "About why I really chose you." Tae-sung had been expecting this conversation. He said nothing, just waited for her to continue. "The Valorian Empire is dying," she said. Her voice was calm, but Tae-sung could hear the pain beneath it. Slowly but certainly. A plague affects our agricultural systems. It started 3 years ago in the outer colonies and has been spreading ever since. Our greatest scientists cannot stop it. Everything they try only makes it worse. She led him to a bench overlooking a pond. In the water, earthfish swam alongside alien creatures. Someone had created a small ecosystem that should not work, but somehow did. We have lost 17 farming worlds, the princess continued. Billions depend on those worlds for food. We have perhaps 2 years before the core agricultural systems fail. After that, famine. Chaos. The empire will collapse not from war or invasion, but from hunger. Tae-sung felt the weight of her words settle over him. And you think I can help? I think humans see problems differently, she said. Your species has nearly destroyed itself a dozen times and somehow always found a way to survive. You adapt. You improvise. You refuse to accept that a problem cannot be solved. She pulled out a small data device and handed it to him. This contains everything we know about the plague. I have been studying newly contacted species for 3 years, looking for someone who might offer a different perspective. When I read your research papers about Earth's ocean recovery, I knew I had found what I needed. Tae-sung took the device. You chose me for my research on ecosystem restoration? I chose you because you saved an entire ocean by thinking about it differently than anyone else, Princess Hayron said. Valorian scientists are brilliant, but they all think the same way. They see the plague as an enemy to destroy. What if it is something else? What if we need someone who thinks like a human? The next day, Tae-sung found himself on a ship heading to the agricultural research station where the plague had first appeared. Princess Hayrin came with him, along with Yoon Seo and Ji-woo. The chief attendant had been less cold toward Tae-sung since the assassination attempt. She still did not smile, but at least she seemed to think he might be useful. The research station orbited a planet covered in vast farming complexes. From space, Tae-sung could see the damage. Brown patches spread across what should have been green fields. The plague was winning. Director Byung-ho met them at the station. He was an elderly Valorian with tired eyes and the bearing of someone who had not slept properly in months. Your Highness, he said, bowing. I wish I had better news to report. Show us everything, Princess Hayron commanded. They spent hours reviewing data. The plague was a microorganism that attacked the root systems of the empire's staple crops. It spread through soil and water, resistant to every pesticide and bioweapon the Valorians had developed. Attempts to kill it with heat or radiation only made it evolve faster. We have tried everything, Director Byung-ho said, frustration clear in his voice. We even attempted to genetically modify the crops to resist it, but the plague simply adapted. It is as if the harder we fight it, the stronger it becomes. Tae-sung studied the data in silence. Something about the plague's behavior pattern felt familiar. He pulled up historical records of its spread, mapping how it moved through different agricultural systems. It does not act like a disease, he said slowly. Diseases spread randomly, following opportunity. This spreads in a pattern. It targets specific crop densities and soil compositions. It is almost like it is trying to restore balance. Balance? Director Byung-ho looked confused. It is destroying our crops. What balance could that create? Tae-sung pulled up more data, his mind racing. Your agricultural systems are incredibly efficient. You pack crops at maximum density, using every centimeter of available soil. You maintain perfect growing conditions artificially. But look at where the plague spreads fastest. It thrives in the most heavily cultivated areas and avoids the margins where you have buffer zones. Because those are the richest targets, the director argued. Or because those are the most unbalanced systems, Tae-sung countered. What if this is not a plague? What if it is a correction mechanism? Something that evolved to restore ecological balance when systems become too far out of equilibrium? Princess Hayrin leaned forward. Explain. On Earth, when we pushed our oceans too far, we saw similar patterns. Species that were normally harmless would suddenly explode in population, causing massive damage. We thought they were invasions or diseases, but really they were symptoms of imbalance. The oceans were trying to restore themselves. He pulled up microscopic images of the plague organism. This does not look like a pathogen. It looks like a decomposer. Something that breaks down organic matter and returns nutrients to the soil. In a balanced system, it would be harmless, maybe even beneficial. But in your hyper-intensive agricultural systems, it has nothing to regulate it. Director Byung-ho shook his head. But we have tried reducing crop density. The plague still spread. How much did you reduce it? Tae-sung asked. By 15%. That is not enough. You need to think about this differently. Stop trying to kill the plague. Start trying to work with it. The room fell silent. Finally, Director Byung-ho spoke. You want us to let it destroy our crops? No, Tae-sung said. I want you to give it something else to do. Introduce competitor organisms that fill the same ecological niche. Change the soil composition to favor beneficial microorganisms. Create genuine biodiversity instead of monoculture. Make your farms into actual ecosystems instead of just production facilities. That would reduce our yields, the director protested. In the short term, yes, Tae-sung agreed, but it would also save your agricultural systems from complete collapse. A farm that produces 80% of maximum yield forever is better than one that produces 100% for 2 more years, and then nothing. Princess Hayrin stood. We will try it. Start with one farming complex. Implement the human suggestions. Your Highness, with respect, this is madness, Director Byung-ho said. We should trust our own scientists, not a primitive alien who studies fish. Our own scientists have been failing for 3 years, the princess said coldly. We will try something different. You have 1 month to show results. The next month was tense. Tae-sung worked with a small team of Valorian scientists who ranged from cautiously interested to openly hostile. He felt out of his depth constantly. These were not Earth ecosystems. The biology was alien, the chemistry different. But the basic principles remained the same. Balance, diversity, working with natural processes instead of against them. They introduced dozens of new microorganism species to the test farm's soil. They reduced crop density by 40% and planted native prairie species in the margins. They changed irrigation patterns to mimic natural water cycles. They stopped using chemical treatments and let the system find its own equilibrium. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. The plague continued to spread. Tae-sung began to doubt himself. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe alien biology was too different. Maybe he had condemned an entire empire to starvation because of his arrogance. Then, in the 3rd week, something changed. The plague's growth slowed. The new microorganisms began to establish themselves, competing for the same resources. The crops did not recover immediately, but they stopped dying. Slowly, tentatively, the system began to stabilize. By the end of the month, the test farm showed clear improvement. The plague was still present, but it was no longer dominant. It had become just one part of a larger ecosystem, held in check by competition and balance. Director Byung-ho stared at the results in disbelief. It is working, he whispered. It is actually working. Princess Hayrin put a hand on Tae-sung's shoulder. You saved us, she said quietly. Not yet, Tae-sung replied. This is one farm. You need to implement this across the entire empire. That will take years, and not all of your scientists will accept it easily. Some will resist changing methods that have worked for generations. They will accept it, the princess said with absolute certainty, because the alternative is extinction. News of the success spread quickly. Tae-sung became famous throughout the empire, not as the princess's strange pet, but as the human who had saved Valorian agriculture. Other scientists requested his consultation. Universities wanted him to lecture. He received honors and awards from people who had sneered at him weeks before. Through it all, Tae-sung felt oddly disconnected. He had done what he always did, looked at a problem, thought about it carefully, and found a solution. That humans did this differently than other species was not something he had ever really considered before. You showed them that weakness can be strength, Princess Hayrin told him one evening. They were back in the palace gardens watching earthfish swim in the alien pond. Humans are not strong or advanced, but you survived a harsh world by being flexible, creative, stubborn. Those qualities matter more than strength. Tae-sung watched the fish. They were so far from home, yet they thrived here. just like him. I understand why you chose me now, he said. I just wish you had told me from the start. Would you have believed me? The princess asked. Tae-sung thought about it and laughed. No, probably not. The message from Earth arrived on a quiet morning while Tae-sung was reading in the palace library. His contract period was complete. He was free to return home. Tae-sung stared at the message for a long time. Home. The word felt strange now. He had been on the Valorian homeworld for nearly 6 months. 6 months that had changed everything he thought he knew about the universe and his place in it. Earth's scientific community wanted him back desperately. The message listed a dozen research positions, all of them prestigious, all of them his for the asking. They wanted to hear everything he had learned. They wanted him to teach them about alien biology, ecosystem management on a galactic scale, the applications of his discoveries. He should be excited. This was everything he had worked for his entire career. Fame, respect, the chance to do groundbreaking research. So why did the thought of leaving make his chest feel tight? Bad news? Yoon-seo asked. She had entered the library quietly, carrying a datapad with the day's schedule. No, Tae-sung said. Good news, actually. I can go home. My service period is over. Yoon-seo's expression did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. I see. When do you depart? I have not decided yet. The chief attendant sat down across from him, which was unusual. She rarely sat in his presence. The princess will not ask you to stay, she said. She believes you have given enough. What do you think? Tae-sung asked. Yoon-seo was quiet for a moment. When you first arrived, I thought her choice was foolish. A weak human who knew nothing of our ways. I was wrong. You saved her life. You saved our empire's future. You have proven that strength comes in many forms. She paused. But Earth is your home. Your people need you. It would be wrong for us to keep you here. Tae-sung appreciated her honesty, even if it did not make his decision easier. Over the next few days, he found himself walking through the palace, seeing it with new eyes. The corridors he had once found confusing were now familiar. The staff who had once avoided him now greeted him respectfully. Ji-woo had started teaching him basic Valorian combat techniques, more as friendship than duty. Even Lord Cavil, his former antagonist, had grudgingly accepted him as a worthy presence at court. This place had become something like a second home. These people had become something like friends. Princess Hayron summoned him on the third day after the message arrived. They met in her private study, a room Tae-sung had been invited to only a handful of times. It was filled with books and datapads from hundreds of worlds, evidence of a mind that never stopped learning. You received Earth's message, she said. It was not a question. Yes. You should go, the princess said firmly. You have done more than anyone could have asked. Your people need you. Your research needs you. You should not feel obligated to stay because of what has happened here. Is that what you want? Tae-sung asked. For me to leave? Princess Hayron looked away. What I want is not important. You are free, Tae-sung. You always were. I brought you here for a purpose, and that purpose is fulfilled. Anything more would be taking advantage of your kindness. You still have not answered my question. The princess met his eyes. For the first time since he had known her, she looked uncertain. No, she said quietly. I do not want you to leave. Your presence here has been valuable beyond the agricultural crisis. You see things differently. You ask questions no one else thinks to ask. You have become a trusted advisor and a friend. But I will not let my desires trap you in a place you do not want to be. Tae-sung smiled. What if I want to be here? Before the princess could respond, Yoon-seo entered with another visitor. Lord Cavil, looking unusually humble. The noble bowed to both of them. I have a proposal, Cavil said, for the human. Tae-sung waited. He and Cavil had reached an understanding after the assassination attempt, but they would never be friends. The Empire has seen the value of the human perspective, Cavil continued. But we have only one human. This is inefficient. He looked at Tae-sung. What if we had more? What if Earth and the Valorian Empire established a permanent exchange program? Human scientists and thinkers coming here to work alongside our people, and our people going to Earth to learn from yours. A cultural and scientific exchange, Princess Hyren said thoughtfully. It would formalize Earth's place in the galactic community, give both our civilizations access to different ways of thinking. Exactly, Cavil said, and someone would need to run such a program, someone who understands both human and Valorian ways. Someone with proven ability to bridge the gap between species. He looked directly at Tai-Sung. I propose you for the position. Tai-Sung felt his breath catch. That would mean staying here, permanently. Not permanently, Cavell corrected. The position would require regular travel to Earth. You would spend time in both worlds, but your primary residence would be here, at the palace, coordinating the exchange. It was a solution Tai-Sung had not considered. Not choosing between Earth and here, but having both. Being a bridge between worlds, literally and figuratively. I need to think about it, he said. Of course, Cavell replied. Take whatever time you need. He bowed and left. Princess Hyren waited until they were alone again. You do not have to accept. Do not let politics pressure you into a decision. Is this what you want? Tai-Sung asked again. I want you to choose freely, the princess said. Whatever that choice is. You have given enough to us, more than enough. Whatever you decide, you will leave here with the Empire's gratitude and my friendship. Tai-Sung spent the next week thinking. He sent messages to friends on Earth, to his old research partners, to his family. He talked to Jiwoo and Yunseo, and even some of the scientists he had worked with on the agricultural project. Everyone had opinions. Earth wanted him home. The Empire wanted him to stay. His mother wanted him safe. His colleagues wanted him wherever he could do the most good. But none of them could make the choice for him. In the end, it was the fish that helped him decide. He was sitting by the pond in the garden, watching the earth fish swim with their alien companions. They were thriving here, in a place they were never meant to be, because someone had created an environment where different species could coexist. That was what he wanted to do. Not just solve one problem or publish one paper, but create something lasting. A bridge between worlds. A way for humans and aliens to learn from each other, to combine their different strengths and perspectives. He found Princess Hyren in the same garden an hour later. She was feeding the fish, a quiet smile on her face. I am staying, Tai-Sung said. The princess turned to him. Are you certain? Yes, I will take the position running the exchange program. I will travel to Earth regularly, maintain my research connections there. But this is important. Helping Earth and the Empire understand each other. Building something that lasts beyond one crisis or one person. You do not have to do this for me, Princess Hyren said softly. I am not doing it for you, Tai-Sung replied. I am doing it for me, for Earth, for the future. You gave me a chance to be part of something larger than myself. I want to keep being part of it. The princess smiled, a genuine, warm expression that Tai-Sung had rarely seen. Then welcome, officially, to the Valorian Empire. Not as my attendant or my choice, but as my colleague and friend. They shook hands, a human gesture that Princess Hyren had learned. Then they stood together, watching the fish swim in their impossible pond. 2 months later, the first group of human scientists arrived. Tai-Sung met them at the spaceport, remembering how overwhelming everything had seemed when he first arrived. Now he was the one welcoming others, helping them navigate this strange new world. The exchange program grew quickly. Humans brought their creativity and adaptability. Valorians shared their advanced technology and accumulated knowledge. Both sides learned. Both sides grew. Tai-Sung traveled to Earth 3 times that first year. Each time, he marveled at how strange his home planet seemed now. The blue oceans, the familiar gravity, the easy communication with everyone around him. It was comforting and confining at the same time. He always returned to the Valorian homeworld, feeling like he was coming back to where he belonged. Princess Hyren's political position strengthened considerably. The success of the agricultural project and the exchange program made her a leading voice for progressive policies. Lord Cavell eventually became one of her strongest political allies, having realized that cooperation with humans offered more advantages than opposition. On a quiet evening, a year after Tai Sung had made his choice, he and the princess walked through the gardens again. It had become their tradition, a time to talk freely without the weight of their official positions. Do you regret it? Princess Hayron asked. Staying here? Giving up the life you could have had on Earth? Tae Sung thought about it honestly. Sometimes I miss the ocean, the real ocean, not the aquariums here. I miss certain foods. I miss speaking my own language without having to think about it. But, the princess prompted, but I am doing work that matters. I am building something that will last beyond my lifetime. Humans and Valorians working together, learning from each other. That is worth more than any research paper or any academic position, he smiled. Besides, someone has to make sure the next generation of humans who come here do not accidentally touch things that glow. The princess laughed. A valuable service indeed. They reached the pond with the earthfish. The original ones had reproduced. Now dozens of them swam alongside the alien species, a thriving mixed ecosystem that should not work but did. You changed everything, Princess Hayron said quietly. Not just the agricultural systems or the exchange program. You changed how we think about strength, about value, about what it means to be advanced. You proved that being different is not being lesser. Humans are good at that, Tai Sung said, being underestimated and then surprising everyone. Yes, the princess agreed. You are. Tae Sung looked up at the artificial stars above them. Somewhere out there was Earth, his first home. Here was his second home. He belonged to both now, and that was exactly right. Thank you, he said. For what? For setting your eyes on the human and claiming you wanted this one, for seeing something in humanity that no one else did, for giving me the chance to prove you right. Princess Hayron smiled. You proved yourself right, Tae Sung. I just gave you the opportunity. Everything else was you. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the fish swim in their impossible pond, proof that different worlds could coexist and thrive together. It just took someone brave enough to try.